The hum of the airport was relentless, a river of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and overhead announcements weaving together into a cacophony that seemed to belong to another world entirely. In the secluded VIP terminal, everything felt insulated, polished to a precise gleam, a world apart from the chaos just beyond the tinted windows. Businessmen checked watches with crisp efficiency, assistants trailed dutifully, and drivers idled in sleek black cars, engines humming softly. Julian Mercer emerged from the lounge, phone pressed to his ear, a mask of calm over a mind racing beneath tailored perfection. His navy suit hugged every line of his body, tie slightly loosened, the very image of a man in control. "Yes, I reviewed the documents," he said, voice clipped and steady. "Singapore will receive our signature after the briefing. No delays?" He ended the call, sliding the phone into his coat pocket, and moved toward Gate 4B, where his team awaited, each step purposeful. Then something froze him mid-stride. A glimmer of gold caught in the crowd. A woman crouched down, adjusting the straps of a small backpack. Her hair, a cascade of blonde caught in a loose, careless braid, shimmered beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Julian's breath hitched, as if the air itself had thickened. Celeste Harper. Time didn't merely slow, it fractured. She hadn't changed much, just a little thinner, faint traces of fatigue around her eyes, but it was unmistakably her. The woman whose laughter once filled his apartment, whose smile had once promised a shared forever. And she wasn't alone. Two small girls, no older than 4, stood beside her in matching sundresses, strawberry pink backpacks bouncing as they whispered to each other. One giggled, and Julian felt a tug in his chest, a pull, deep and raw. Then one of the girls turned, and Julian's world shifted. Storm-grey eyes, his eyes, looked back at him. Not merely the color, but the exact shape, the tilt in her smile. The resemblance was undeniable. Celeste's gaze lifted, and their eyes met for a heartbeat. Julian's lips parted, soundless, a tremor in his chest as instinct and disbelief collided. He took a tentative step forward, unthinking, while Celeste instinctively gathered the girls to her sides, one in each arm. Without a word, she turned, stride tight, purposeful, leaving him frozen in the stream of strangers. The airport fading into muted background noise. He struggled to breathe, as if the air had been wrenched from his lungs. She had children, twins, and one of them bore his eyes. Logic tried to intervene, whispered about coincidence, shadows, tricks of light, but Julian felt the truth deep in his bones. Celeste. The name, unspoken for years, surged in his mind. She hadn't vanished from the world. She had simply disappeared from his life, leaving behind a silent ache that had never healed. His assistant appeared, phone in hand, confusion etched across her features. "So the boardroom is ready. They need your final approval." "I need a minute," Julian said, voice distant, eyes still locked on the empty space where Celeste had stood. "Reschedule the meeting." The assistant hesitated, then stepped back, obediently muttering into the phone. Julian remained rooted, chest hollow, thoughts a whirlwind. 4 years ago, everything had felt golden. Their life together had been a symphony of small, perfect moments. Julian Mercer, heir to Callahan International, had lived in the boardrooms of billion-dollar mergers, while Celeste Harper, a freelance illustrator, carried sunlight in her laugh and paint under her nails. Their Tribeca apartment was cluttered, messy in a way that felt alive. Doodles on napkins, art supplies spilling across the kitchen table, mismatched mugs, and mornings scented with burnt toast and soft music. Julian brought her tea each day. She left sketches tucked into his briefcase. They were young, happy, and entirely in love. Then he had taken her to Montauk, at the cusp of dusk. Waves lapped at their ankles, wind tangling her hair, and Julian knelt in the sand. "Celeste Harper," he said, voice unsteady. "You are my peace. Will you marry me?" She had said yes without hesitation, and the ocean had borne witness to their joy. But happiness, fragile and fleeting, unraveled swiftly. 3 weeks later, Julian's father died. A heart attack, sudden and brutal. Overnight, Julian became the unwilling captain of a fragile empire, media vultures circling, investors demanding certainty. Celeste waited for him, trust unwavering, while the world pulled him under. And then she discovered she was pregnant. She had placed the positive test in a white envelope on his nightstand, planning to tell him herself that evening. But the world had other plans. Locked in a boardroom, Julian was told by cold voices that their engagement was a liability. His mother, unwavering and strategic, demanded a new alliance. Vivian Langford, the daughter of a key investor. Power over love. He tried to resist, tried to plead, but legal lines and cold calculations won. His phone was changed, her messages blocked. Press photos, arranged engagements, a narrative spun. Julian had moved on and Celeste had vanished from his life. But she hadn't left willingly. Celeste waited 3 days, then saw the truth everywhere. Julian and Vivian smiling hand in hand across every screen. Heartbroken, pregnant, she packed a single suitcase and boarded a bus west, leaving no trace, no goodbye, carrying with her the quiet agony of being forced to survive alone. 4 years later, Julian Mercer stood alone in New York, as CEO of one of the fastest-growing AI firms, penthouse pristine, life empty. Photos of Celeste, faded now, remained tucked in the bottom drawer of his desk. He had tried to find her, hired private investigators, only to have every lead buried by forces unknown. His heart had never stopped questioning, never stopped aching. Meanwhile, in Oregon, far from Manhattan's steel skyline, Celeste Harper had built a life on resilience and love. A small flower shop, Bloom and Brush, modest yet warm, became the center of her universe. Soft classical music, the scent of eucalyptus and lavender, bouquets tied with care, laughter of her daughters filling every corner. Isla and Eden Mercer, her twin girls, her heartbeat incarnate, played and painted and filled her days with joy that was at once complete and achingly bittersweet. Celeste told herself she had let go of Julian. She had to, for her children, for herself. But at night, when the world fell silent, when the girls slept and the stars blinked overhead, the memory of Julian's eyes haunted her. Did he ever think of her? Did he ever know? Did he ever care? Then the impossible happened. Across the VIP terminal at JFK, fate orchestrated a collision 4 years in the making. Julian saw Celeste with the girls, Isla and Eden, each small face carrying echoes of his own. His heart threatened to stop, his mind a whirl of disbelief, longing and hope. Their first confrontation was quiet, yet electric. Celeste, protective, resolute, demanded an explanation. Julian, raw and vulnerable, offered truths that had been silenced for years. Lies, manipulation, miscommunication, all peeled away in minutes, exposing the hearts that had never stopped beating for each other. "I never got your messages," Julian confessed. "They said it was for security. I thought you'd left me." Celeste's voice trembled as she whispered, "I was pregnant." And suddenly the distance of years collapsed into shared pain, understanding, and a fragile bridge toward forgiveness. Neither had stopped loving. Neither had been free to stay. But now the past was confronting them with the clarity of a mirror, and both saw what had endured. The hum of the airport faded around Julian as he watched Celeste walk away with Isla and Eden. He did not move immediately. He allowed himself a moment to feel the weight of all that had been lost. The ache of 4 years, the overwhelming realization that love, patient and indestructible, had survived. In Oregon, Celeste's flower shop became the stage for another quiet miracle. Julian returned, not as the polished, untouchable CEO, but as a man stripped bare, seeking only connection, trust, and a place in the lives of the children he had never known. He left gifts, books and kindness, letting Isla and Eden discover him slowly. No grand declarations, no demands, just presence. And little by little, the walls around Celeste's heart, around her family, began to shift. Julian's persistence was patient, gentle, undeniable. The first spark of tentative hope flared in Celeste's chest when he knelt to meet the girls on their level, reading stories in playful voices, bringing laughter into the shop, the home they had built in secret. The connection was messy, raw, and real. And as she watched them through the doorway, she felt it. An ache, a longing, a possibility she had dared not dream for herself. And then came the storm. The morning sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when a sudden flash of light struck Celeste Harper squarely in the face. She flinched, nearly dropping the box of lilies in her hands, and for a moment the world seemed to tilt. Voices followed, sharp and invasive, demanding, probing, slicing through the quiet of her flower shop. "Miss Harper, is it true the twins are Julian Mercer's daughters?" One shouted. "Were you his secret lover while he was engaged to Vivian Langford? Do the girls know? Are you planning to seek inheritance?" Celeste instinctively recoiled, heart hammering in her chest. Inside the shop, Isla and Eden played obliviously in their corner, unaware of the onslaught that threatened to shatter their carefully protected world. Her breath caught, panic clawing at her throat, but before she could respond, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside. The doors opened, and Julian Mercer emerged, his face pale, eyes flashing with controlled fury. "Enough," he said, voice low but firm. Every step toward the cameras was deliberate, commanding, a shield between the chaos and the small family behind him. The reporters didn't budge. "This is private property. There are children inside." He squared his shoulders. The authority of a man who had commanded empires now wielded to protect what truly mattered. "Are these your children?" someone shouted. Julian's gaze met the camera lenses. "Yes," he said, voice clear and unwavering. "They are my daughters. If you have any respect for childhood, for innocence, you will leave them alone." Celeste's lips parted in disbelief. Every flash of light from the cameras, every pointed question, faded behind the strength in Julian's stance. By noon, the world had taken notice. News feeds erupted. Tech CEO Julian Mercer confirms twin daughters with former fiancée. Private love, public revelation. Headlines rolled like a tide, yet Julian walked away from the uproar with the weight of millions lost on his shoulders and not a trace of regret. That evening, as the Oregon sky darkened and rain began to whisper against rooftops, Celeste locked up Bloom and Brush. Julian returned quietly, not in his tailored suits, not with speeches or apologies, but simply present human waiting. "Can I talk to them?" he asked softly. Celeste nodded, her heart a knot of caution and longing. Inside, Isla and Eden were curled up with their favorite books. Julian knelt before them, meeting each gaze with steady sincerity. "I have something important to say," he began. Isla tilted her head, eyebrows knit in curiosity. "Did we do something wrong?" she asked. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong," Julian replied, voice shaking with the weight of confession. "A long time ago I left. I didn't even know you existed. But now I do, and I want to be here." "Not sometimes." "All the time." The girls exchanged uncertain glances, then slowly, hesitantly, each took his hands. Julian drew them close, arms wrapping around both Isla and Eden. Behind him, Celeste covered her mouth, tears threatening to spill. She had dreamed of this 4 years ago in a sterile hospital room, alone with 2 tiny lives and an absent father, but never imagined it could truly come to life. And now, here it was. Julian, not as CEO, not as the man who left, but as their father, whole and unwavering. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming a steady rhythm on the windows. Back in New York, Julian Mercer had once sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by glass and steel, longing for a world he could no longer access. Yet all those skyscrapers, all those accolades, had never mattered as much as this quiet moment of connection in Oregon. Here, amidst the scent of lilies and the warmth of his daughter's laughter, the world narrowed to the small, irreplaceable unit of family he had fought to protect. Weeks passed, and Julian's presence became a rhythm in their lives. Sometimes he arrived with books, illustrated tales that captivated Isla and Eden. Other times, pastries or simple moments of laughter. He never forced the past into the present, never pressed Celeste for explanations. He was patient, allowing the girls to dictate the pace, letting trust grow organically. And slowly, she began to see the man who stood before her. Not the polished, untouchable CEO from years ago, but someone grounded, present, tempered by time and regret. One night, after closing, Celeste stepped outside and found Julian's car still parked across the street. Engine off, lights dark, waiting silently. "You're still here," she said, cautious yet unsettled. "I like knowing they're safe," he replied simply.
"Is that okay?"
She crossed her arms. "It won't be easy. They've never had a father." "If you disappear again, I won't," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You don't get to promise that." "Not after last time," Julian only nodded. "Then don't believe my words." "Watch what I do." And she could see it, no longer the young, ambitious man who had vanished in a storm of obligations and pressures, but someone older, steadier, and painfully sincere. Even as night fell and the girls' small voices drifted down from the window above, Julian remained, lit from within by a quiet hope. "Good night, Julian," Eden called softly, her voice breaking through the tension. He smiled, and in that smile, Celeste recognized a transformation. The man she had once loved had returned, not to reclaim what was lost, but to claim what had always been his, in truth, their family. But peace, even fragile, was not to last unchallenged. A sudden intrusion into the flower shop's morning calm shattered the quiet hours, cameras flashing, voices demanding, accusations flying. Julian immediately took action, standing protectively in front of Celeste and the girls, the authority in his voice unassailable. His declaration that Isla and Eden were his daughters was both shield and proclamation, a public acknowledgement that merged love and responsibility. The ripple effect was immediate. Calls from investors, concerned board members, and media inquiries flooded in, each demanding clarity. A critical contract with an overseas partner hung by a thread, and Julian made a choice. Money and business could wait. His daughters could not. "If signing this deal means denying they exist, the answer is no," he told the room, calm and resolute. The silence that followed was profound, punctuated only by the understanding that he had chosen a different kind of legacy, one of honesty, integrity, and love. Returning to Oregon that evening, Julian entered the flower shop not with grand gestures but with gentle intention. He knelt before the girls once more, voice low and earnest, explaining in terms they could understand. Mistakes of the past, absence, misunderstanding, all acknowledged and framed in a way that allowed Isla and Eden to meet him not with fear, but with curiosity and eventually trust. Celeste watched silently, heart aching with a mix of relief and wonder. The space between them had not vanished entirely, but it had softened, filled with tentative hope. Each laugh, each small question, each moment of shared joy chipped away at the years of pain and misunderstanding. Slowly, irrevocably, Julian was becoming the father and partner they had all longed for, quietly proving that love, when patient, could indeed return. As the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, a sense of calm settled over Bloom and Brush. Julian read aloud to the girls, voices shifting between characters, creating an atmosphere of warmth and wonder. Celeste stood in the doorway, absorbing the sight of family forming before her eyes. The fire of the past still lingered, yes, but now it was tempered by understanding, by the knowledge that both had endured, survived, and were finally allowed the chance to rebuild together. And as the evening deepened, the soft sound of water against the windows mirrored the steady pulse of a heart that had waited too long to beat freely. Julian Mercer, CEO, businessman, son of empire and expectation, had found his place not in boardrooms or skyscrapers, but in the quiet, miraculous rhythm of a family finally reunited. Days turned into weeks, and Julian Mercer's presence in Celeste Harper's life became less of an intrusion and more of a quiet, comforting constant. He never forced himself into their routines. He moved around their world like a shadow that brought warmth instead of fear. Isla and Eden began to anticipate his visits, the sparkle of curiosity in their eyes when the brown delivery box appeared at the shop, tied with string, filled with carefully chosen books and whimsical illustrations. Each story contained small lessons, hints of logic and creativity, but also a quiet reminder that their father had thought of them, imagined their laughter, and longed to be present in their lives. Celeste watched him from the doorway more than once, heart caught in a web of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to rush forward and reclaim what had been lost, to wrap herself in his arms and never let go. But another more cautious part of her remembered the pain, the absence, the way he had vanished without explanation. Yet, with every small act of kindness, with every patience-laden gesture, Julian chipped away at the walls she had so carefully built to protect her daughters and herself. One afternoon, Julian leaned back on a bench outside the shop, while Eden gently braided a strand of his hair. Isla, always inquisitive, peppered him with questions about coding, robots, and numbers, her words tumbling like a small storm. Julian laughed, the sound deep and unguarded, answering each inquiry with care, never overstepping, never claiming more than he had earned. Celeste, watching quietly from inside, realized how much she had missed this, the normal, simple connection of a father with his children. The ache of the past mingled with a budding warmth, tentative but undeniable. Yet even as these small moments built toward a fragile peace, the world outside threatened to intrude. One morning, the familiar flash of cameras shattered the calm. Julian had taught Celeste to expect intrusion, but nothing could fully prepare her for the flood of questions, accusations, and aggressive reporters crowding the flower shop's doorway. "Miss Harper, is it true the girls are Julian Mercer's children?" one shouted. "Were you hiding this while he was engaged to Vivian Langford?" The voices were relentless, invasive, a stark reminder that their carefully constructed sanctuary was fragile. Julian did not hesitate. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice unwavering. "Enough," he said firmly, placing himself between the cameras and his family. "This is private property. There are children inside. If you respect childhood, innocence, and decency, you will leave them alone." Reporters shouted further, demanding confirmation, but Julian's gaze, steady and resolute, silenced them. "Yes," he said, "they are my daughters. If that is a problem for anyone, then leave us in peace." The declaration went viral within hours. Headlines screamed across digital platforms. Tech CEO Julian Mercer admits twin daughters. Private life exposed. Calls from investors and business partners flooded in, questions about contracts and shareholder concerns taking precedence. But Julian made one choice clear. No contract, no deal, was worth denying the existence of his daughters. "If signing this deal means I deny them, then the answer is no," he told a conference room full of expectant faces. "Find another partner. I have one chance to be a real father, and I won't waste it." Later that evening, rain lightly drumming against the rooftops, Julian returned to the flower shop. not with press conferences or speeches, but quietly, humbly. "Can I talk to him?" he asked, soft, almost tentative. Celeste nodded, her heart a tangle of relief, fear, and hope. Inside, Isla and Eden sat cross-legged, eyes bright with curiosity. Julian knelt to meet them, gently taking their hands. "I have something very important to say," he began. The girls leaned in, small faces expectant. "Did we do something wrong?" Isla asked. "No, my loves." "You didn't do anything wrong," Julian said, voice trembling. "A long time ago I left.
I didn't even know you existed."
But now I do. And I want to be here, not sometimes, all the time." Hesitant glances exchanged, hands slipping into his, and Julian held them close. Celeste watched, tears pricking her eyes. 4 years of solitude, pain, and unanswered questions had led to this quiet, tender reclamation of family. This was the moment she had dreamed of in the quiet, lonely hours, and it was finally real. Julian, not as CEO, not as a man consumed by obligations, but as their father, fully present, fully human. The rain outside deepened, a gentle, persistent rhythm against the shop windows. In New York, Julian would have been surrounded by calls, obligations, board meetings. Here, in Oregon, surrounded by lilies and laughter, he was exactly where he needed to be. The weight of the past, the mistakes, and the years of separation could not touch the small circle of warmth he had built around his family tonight. In the days that followed, Julian's presence became a fixture. Mornings were filled with school preparations, afternoons with laughter and curiosity, and evenings with quiet storytelling. He learned to braid Eden's hair, to answer Isla's endless questions with patience and humor, to participate in the small rituals that had kept Celeste and the girls grounded. No words about the past were necessary. His actions spoke louder than any explanation could. Celeste, cautious yet warming, began to allow herself glimpses of what life could be with Julian in it. Each smile, each shared laugh, each soft evening spent reading or walking through the small Oregon streets nudged her heart toward a quiet acceptance. And slowly, inevitably, hope took root where once only despair had grown. One rainy afternoon, Celeste watched Julian leave the shop, car waiting silently across the street. The girls waved, smiling and laughing, Eden's braid bouncing with her movements. Julian's eyes met Celeste's for a fleeting moment, a silent promise before he drove away. She could feel the weight of it, the certainty that he would not abandon them again, not now, not ever. Later, she sat with the girls, sketching and painting, the shop bathed in golden lamplight. Isla held up a drawing of 4 stick figures under a starry sky. "Our family forever," she said proudly. Celeste's breath caught. The years of separation, of struggle, of fear and doubt coalesced into this moment of simple truth. Love had endured, and family had been reclaimed. Evening fell, and the rain softened into a steady drizzle. Julian returned to the shop, carrying soft, warm pastries and a small collection of new books. He knelt beside Isla and Eden, reading aloud, his voice shifting between characters, breathing life into the stories. Celeste stood quietly in the doorway watching them, feeling her heart expand and contract with the realization that they were finally building a life together, fragile, imperfect, and entirely theirs. The fire of the past lingered faintly, but it no longer consumed them. It had transformed into something quieter, stronger, a recognition of endurance, resilience, and love that had withstood time, distance, and misunderstanding. Julian Mercer, the man who had once been torn between obligation and desire, had returned not as a conqueror, but as a father, a partner, and a man who had learned the true meaning of presence and commitment. Through soft rain, glowing lamplight, and whispered laughter, a family began to stitch itself together again, one tender moment at a time. Each smile, each gentle touch, each shared story was a thread weaving back the fabric of their lives, fragile yet unbreakable. The days that followed carried the rhythm of gentle reconnection. Julian Mercer's visits became a seamless part of life at Blumenbrush. He arrived with small tokens of attention, books carefully chosen for Isla and Eden, pastries from the bakery next door, or sometimes just a quiet presence that filled the space without demanding acknowledgement. Celeste Harper, ever vigilant, watched these interactions with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The girls' laughter filled the shop like sunlight spilling through the windows, and in those moments the pain of the past felt distant. Though not entirely gone, Julian had learned to move slowly, to respect the fragile threads of trust he was rebuilding. He never demanded explanations or tried to assert authority over the girls. Instead, he engaged with them on their terms, listening intently, answering questions with patience, sharing stories, and allowing curiosity to guide their time together. Isla, analytical and cautious, bombarded him with rapid-fire inquiries about logic, robots, and numbers. Julian smiled, answered carefully, and sometimes even challenged her with riddles or simple experiments. Eden, a gentle soul with a creative streak, preferred quiet observation, braiding his hair or pointing at pictures, and he responded with tender attentiveness, his laughter mingling with the soft hum of the flower shop. Through it all, Celeste observed quietly. Her heart wavered between hope and fear. Could she truly allow herself to trust Julian again? The memory of 4 years of abandonment lingered, bitter and vivid. Yet with each act of patience, of care, of unspoken devotion, Julian was demonstrating a depth of love and responsibility that transcended the mistakes of the past. One evening, as the rain painted the Oregon streets in shimmering streaks, Celeste closed the shop for the night. Julian's car remained parked across the street, engine off, lights dimmed, waiting silently. She stepped outside, the wet air chilling her face. "You're still here," she said, her voice hesitant. "I like knowing they're safe," Julian replied simply. "Is that okay?" She crossed her arms. "It won't be easy. They've never had a father." "If you disappear again, I won't," he said quietly, his tone steady. "You don't get to promise that," she said, her eyes sharp. "Not after last time." Julian only nodded, accepting her caution without argument.
"Then don't believe my words. Watch what I do," he said. And in that quiet declaration, Celeste recognized a shift, a subtle but profound transformation from the man who had once vanished into the pressures of his world to the father who now prioritized presence,
Patience and love above all else. Despite these growing bonds, life outside the shop still pressed in relentlessly. One morning, a barrage of camera flashes caught Celeste off guard. She shielded her eyes, nearly dropping a box of lilies as reporters swarmed the storefront. "Miss Harper, is it true the twins are Julian Mercer's children?" one shouted. "Were you hiding this while he was engaged to Vivian Langford? Are you planning legal action?" The question struck like a storm, threatening to unravel the fragile calm she had built. Julian stepped forward immediately, his presence commanding, a wall of protection between his family and the invading world.
"Enough," he said, voice firm and unwavering.
"This is private property. There are children inside. If you respect childhood and innocence, leave us alone." The cameras persisted, flashing incessantly, demanding answers. Julian met their gaze steadily.
"Yes," he said. "They are my daughters."
"If you have any respect for them, for their lives, you will leave." His words carried authority, weight, and an unshakable commitment that silenced most of the crowd. In that moment, Julian was not the CEO, not the man of the boardroom, but a father taking a stand. By noon, the video of his statement had gone viral. Headlines blared. Tech CEO Julian Mercer confirms twin daughters.
Family revelation shocks world.
Investors called, board members demanded explanations, and a critical overseas contract hung in balance. Julian faced the professional consequences without hesitation. If signing this deal means denying they exist, then the answer is no, he told the conference room, calm and resolute. Find another partner. I have one chance to be a real father, and I won't waste it. That evening, Julian returned to Bloom & Brush quietly. He entered the shop without fanfare, not with explanations, apologies, or speeches, but with gentle intention. Inside, Isla and Eden were curled on the couch with their favorite books. Julian knelt before them, voice soft and sincere. I have something important to say, he began. Isla, always perceptive, tilted her head.
Did we do something wrong? No, my loves.
You didn't do anything wrong, Julian replied, voice trembling slightly. A long time ago I left.
I didn't even know you existed.
But now I do, and I want to be here, not just sometimes, all the time. The girls hesitated, uncertain, before taking his hands. Julian wrapped them gently in his arms, pulling them close. Celeste stood silently, tears threatening to spill. 4 years of loneliness, worry, and unanswered questions were finally converging into this quiet reclamation of family. Julian, fully present, fully human, fully their father, was here. Weeks passed, and the small rhythms of family life began to take shape. Julian learned the subtleties of fatherhood, how to braid Eden's hair without tugging, how to answer Isla's endless questions, how to make bedtime stories come alive with voices and gestures. Celeste allowed herself to observe these moments, realizing that the man before her had grown, evolved and proven his commitment through actions, not words. Even as the girls laughed, played and learned, the world beyond the shop remained present. Investors, reporters and business obligations hovered like distant shadows. But within Bloom & Brush, a new equilibrium emerged, a delicate balance of love, trust, and presence that neither money nor power could disrupt. One quiet evening, the rain softened, dripping gently onto the sidewalks. Julian returned once more, carrying pastries and a new set of illustrated books. He settled on the floor with Isla and Eden, reading aloud in voices that danced and shifted with the story. Celeste watched from the doorway, heart full, knowing that this was the life they had fought for, the life they were building together. The ache of the past lingered faintly, but it no longer consumed them. It had transformed into something quieter, stronger, a recognition of endurance, resilience and love that had endured time, distance and misunderstanding. Julian Mercer, once torn between duty and desire, had returned not as a conqueror, but as a father and partner, committed to showing up, staying, and proving that love could endure. The first real weekend together felt like a tentative dance around a life that had been on hold for far too long. Julian, Celeste, and the twins ventured beyond the shop into the gentle embrace of Oregon's coastline. The wind carried the briny scent of the sea, tangling in their hair and lifting their spirits with every step. Isla and Eden raced ahead along the sand, feet sinking into the damp grains, laughter echoing against the cliffs and waves. Julian kept pace with Celeste, glancing at her sideways, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. Their hands brushed occasionally, fingers grazing, testing boundaries, rediscovering intimacy in subtle, careful ways. This is nice, Celeste murmured, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun melted into the ocean. Julian nodded. It is, he agreed. We've had a lot of storms, but maybe it's time to let the calm last a little while. The girls paused and looked back at them, tiny faces shining with the exhilaration of freedom. Julian scooped Eden into his arms, spinning her slightly before setting her down again. Isla took his hand willingly, the trust between them growing steadily with every passing moment. Celeste watched the two of them together, realizing how profoundly her heart had begun to heal. 4 years of grief, doubt, and solitude had softened, replaced with a delicate thread of hope she had once thought lost forever. Later, Back at the flower shop, the quiet of evening wrapped the three of them in its gentle embrace. Julian helped Celeste close for the night, stacking vases and wiping petals from the counter, while Isla and Eden snuggled against him on the couch with storybooks in hand. He read aloud, his voice warm and animated, and the girls laughed at his exaggerated expressions and silly character voices. Celeste leaned against the doorway, her chest tight with emotion, tears threatening to spill. She had built a life of independence, of solitude, and yet the warmth that now filled the shop reminded her of what had been missing all along. The rain began to patter lightly against the windows, a steady, soothing rhythm. Julian glanced outside, thoughts briefly flickering back to the city, to the life he had left behind. He hadn't touched his phone or answered emails, and yet he felt more alive than he had in years. He had chosen this life, not the corporate accolades, not the endless meetings, not the press cycles, but this, his family, present, tangible. Breathing beside him, Celeste crossed the room, wrapping a blanket around herself and Julian, drawing them together.
"Thank you," she whispered, her voice low and steady.
"For not giving up on them or us," Julian's hand brushed against hers.
"I never stopped trying even when I thought I couldn't," he admitted. "I had to learn how to fight differently, to show up in ways that mattered." Their eyes met, unspoken words filling the space between them.
The ache of the past had not vanished, but it had transformed into understanding, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to moving forward. The girls' laughter, soft and rhythmic, wove through the room like a lifeline, binding them together in a tapestry of hope and reclamation. The following months were an exploration of this new life. Julian found himself attending recitals, school events, and quiet bedtime routines. He braided Eden's hair, answered Isla's relentless questions about science and numbers, and even learned the rhythm of the local farmers' market trips with Celeste. He never pushed, never demanded, and never presumed.
Instead, he moved in sync with the life they had built,
gradually earning trust, not through grand gestures, but consistent presence. One night, as the storm outside softened into a drizzle, Julian leaned against the shop window, watching Celeste and the twins play a game with building blocks. Their laughter resonated, a pure, untainted music, and he felt the weight of the past lift slightly. He had been given a second chance, not because the world had allowed it, but because he had fought quietly with intention to reclaim what was rightfully his, the family he had never stopped loving. Celeste approached him, silent, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You're different," she said softly, a mixture of awe and affection in her tone. "You've changed, but for the better." "I've had a lot of time to think," Julian admitted.
"To understand what really matters."
"And now I know. This is it. This is what matters." Their hands intertwined, a subtle yet profound connection that neither words nor years apart could diminish. The past, with all its misunderstandings, pressures and losses, had been harsh, but it had also led them here, to this moment of clarity and quiet triumph. Months passed, and the family settled into a steady rhythm, one built on trust, love, and shared responsibility. Weekends at the beach became routine. Evenings in the flower shop were filled with stories, laughter, and creativity. Julian had learned the art of being present, of showing love not through words alone, but through every small, intentional action. Celeste, in turn, learned to lean on him, to trust that the man who had once vanished would now remain. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived, the beach wedding. Beneath a white arch adorned with wildflowers and delicate linens, Julian and Celeste stood hand in hand, hearts full, gazes locked. Isla and Eden, radiant in matching white dresses, clutched small bouquets of lavender and baby's breath, their eyes sparkling with delight and certainty. It was a ceremony without pomp or spectacle, intimate and true, surrounded by close friends and family. You're glowing, Julian whispered.
Unable to look away. It's because I'm marrying you, Celeste replied.
Her voice steady, joyful. The ceremony flowed effortlessly, moments punctuated by laughter, small gestures, and tears of joy. Julian cradled Celeste's hands, his voice steady, rich with emotion. You and the girls are why I get to start again.
You're why I came home. I vow never to let fear or duty steal what matters. I vow to choose you every day, always. Tears shimmered in Celeste's eyes.
Love doesn't vanish. It waits for us to find our way back.
I choose you, not just for what we lost, but for everything ahead. As they kissed, the ocean roared its approval, waves crashing in rhythm with the joy that radiated from their hearts.
The twins squealed, tossing petals into the wind, innocent witnesses to the long-awaited reunion of love, trust, and family. Night fell, stars emerging above the coastline, as the newly formed family gathered around a fire pit near their beach cottage. Julian crouched over the flames, roasting marshmallows with concentrated intensity, while Isla and Eden tried to perfect their own treats. Celeste watched, blanket wrapped around her, sketchbook at her side, feeling a profound sense of home and belonging. Isla tugged at her sleeve, presenting a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures beneath a starlit sky, depicting the family together, surrounded by fire and ocean.
Our family forever, she said proudly.
Eden echoed, smiling. Celeste's heart swelled. Julian knelt beside them, offering perfectly toasted marshmallows, his arm wrapping gently around Celeste. The fire crackled, soft and warm. The ocean whispered steady in the background. And for the first time in years, Julian, Celeste, Isla, and Eden existed fully together. Words were unnecessary. Love, patience, and presence had rewritten the past, healing wounds that had once seemed insurmountable. Julian leaned close to Celeste, voice barely above the ocean breeze.
Thank you. For what?
She asked. For letting me come back, he said. She turned, pressing a slow, deliberate kiss to his lips beneath the endless sky. In that moment, the camera of memory and imagination would have pulled back to frame the 4 of them, glowing in firelight, framed by sand and sea, stars above, and a light that only family could produce. This was no longer the life dictated by power, expectation, or circumstance. It was the life they had chosen together. The rain, once a harbinger of change and uncertainty, had passed. In its place was warmth, laughter, love, and the quiet assurance that even after years of separation, some hearts inevitably find their way home.